Hey, what is going on, NFT Bros Podcast listeners? I am Adam Andrews, your host, and on today's episode, we have a special guest, Brian D. Evans, with us. In today's episode, we're going to talk about video games, Web3 mainstream adoption, and I have a few very specific questions to ask Brian, and then we're going to see where the conversation goes. Brian is an Inc. 500 entrepreneur, an early stage investor, founder, marketer, and more. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Seen some of your clips of the previous episodes, loving the show. Yeah, so, well, you kind of hit some of the points there. My agency that was on the Inc. 500, I started in the marketing agency world, built up a top 25 marketing agency in the US. We worked with everyone from A-list celebrities to Fortune 500s doing press and various campaigns for video games, user acquisition, things like that, various marketing campaigns. Actually, got my start in the crypto world when I just got sick of the agency world. So what happened was I was starting to build up myself up as a personal brand and a thought leader. And I was writing for sites like Forbes and Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur magazine, more about Web2 topics, marketing topics, things like that. And I was just so sick and bored of regular Web2 marketing things. And I discovered, a good friend of mine, that lived in LA as well. He's back in Sweden now. He invited me to a lunch, and there was a guy there. I think he was from Norway or Denmark, and this guy sat us down at a local restaurant and said, "Hey, something to the effect of, I just took my whole life savings and bought this thing called Ethereum." And I was like, what is Ethereum? It sounded like a virus or something. Like I didn't have a clue what it was. I knew about Bitcoin and things like that. This is back in probably 2013, I want to say. It was right after the Ethereum ICO, which I didn't know about at the time. He said, "Yeah, I invested everything I have and put it into Ethereum." And we were sitting there going, okay, well, this guy's quite bullish. He put everything into this virus or whatever this thing is called. Sounded like a cool name and sounded really interesting. So I said, okay. So I remember going home and I remember having a really hard time remembering the name. And I remember, what was that thing called? Ethereum? Ethereum? I was just asked my friend 10 times. So I got home and finally found out how to buy this thing. And it was a really long roundabout at this point thing to do. It wasn't very easy. I think it was, I want to say I ended up buying on, I think Kraken was around then. I think it was Kraken. I remember finding one centralized exchange that I could make an account on at that point. I didn't know anything about, I had some exposure to Bitcoin before that. I had a friend in, college age that we lived together, and he was mining Bitcoin in the room next to me, back when it was like $1 or something, or maybe less than that. But I didn't have much exposure to it other than hearing about it through him. And I just thought it was some crazy thing. And didn't really keep track of it. Had heard about, for sure a couple of years before, but wasn't quite sure about it. And then this thing called Ethereum. And then what actually interested me the most about Ethereum and why I kind of pivoted my entire business life to this, as a writer, first and foremost, is I was like, wow, Bitcoin was cool because it was, you could do transactions and send money around, in the internet money. But Ethereum was this decentralized operating system, the smart contracts. And that really got me interested from a business use case standpoint. So actually the first content I was writing, on those sites like the Forbes and the Inks, in my own, I have a site as well called Influencive, and I was writing on there. And it was about business use cases of Ethereum and crypto, and blockchain in general. And people really started to catch on to this. And I remember telling a lot of people at the time, this is right when Ethereum started climbing in 2015, to bigger numbers. It was, $20, $60. And I remember telling a lot of people about it. You really got to keep your eye on this, not just from a price speculation standpoint, but from a smart contract. This is decentralized internet. This is something that we can take what we have now and make it where there's no centralized authority. And people, slowly over time started to get an idea for this. So anyways, that interaction, and then and I didn't have that much of the time. I didn't take everything I have and put it into Ethereum, but I got a decent amount. Wish I got more, of course. But really just started nerding out about it and just really got excited about what the possibilities were, and learned about a lot of the things that are just now in 2023 coming to fruition, from other types of digital assets that we're seeing now being very mainstream like NFTs. When we were hearing about them, when I was hearing about them then and writing about them, it was more like this. It was like, it was even challenging myself. Like, is this really possible? Can we really decentralize the internet and host these smart contracts that we don't need centralized companies for? And it was really fascinating to me, but I was really excited about it from that early standpoint. So that was kind of my story of getting into crypto in Web3, which we didn't even call Web3 then. But ever since then, I've just been investing heavily in the space. I've invested into hundreds of projects and tokens and, companies in the space, and do some advisory. Have a venture studio model with my BDE Ventures company, and just really have been 100% in the space for the last several years. Not looked back twice at the marketing agency world, and have had a number of other businesses and still do, and working on a video game, Web3 video game, very, very high fidelity, high quality video game with some top creatives and some really exciting people. So yeah, that's kind of, launched this, Web3 collective called Affinity Accelerator, which is for like more intermediate to advanced people in the space. And really just my whole life now is Web3, crypto, blockchain. So I just kind of go around I'm working on something with Animoca Brands right now, called Mochaverse, on that project. And then another number of other, projects that if they're doing something innovative and exciting and there's good people involved, I'll get behind. So really just trying to be an ambassador for the space more than anything, and just because I believe in this technology so much, and the ethos around everything that's coming too. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. That's awesome that you were in so early. I cannot say the same myself. I got in probably, I think we're approaching the 2-year mark for me. So I got in, I think, right at the hype, or the very, very beginning of like the NFT bull market back in 2021. And so, I think you had a ton more experience than I. When I got in, I kind of was just thrown in, and it was a shit show. Like, everything was selling out in seconds, and it was absolutely madness. It was crazy. Probably one of the worst environments to learn anything about NFTs and trading and crypto, because everything was just getting thrown at you, and it was so fast. But you touched on video games, and I got 2 questions on those. So, are you a gamer? And what is your favorite game? So that's the first question. And then where do you see the future of Web3 gaming and video games coming into Web3?
Yeah, I'm definitely a gamer. I remember playing Mario Brothers as a young kid, and just being hooked ever since. I played a lot of Resident Evil growing up, and that was like my game. And that was before, obviously, like a connected world where we can play versus others online. World of Warcraft I played for way too long. Actually have a very similar story to Vitalik. Was playing World of Warcraft, had a mage and a demon hunter, and they were very overpowered. And then Warcraft, Blizzard decided to nerf my character, and then I got pissed and stopped playing. I've gone back to it a few times since, but Vitalik had a similar story. He had a warlock, and he basically started Ethereum because his warlock got nerfed, and he was pissed about it. So it's interesting, and I think this is actually really important to this topic of video games. Video games are so core to Web3. It's unbelievable. First and foremost, video games are, I always tell people this, they're a leader. They lead culture. So if you think about video games, back to Mario Brothers, Resident Evil, Mortal Kombat, there's so many, Witcher now, you could probably think of many more, Assassin's Creed. They came first, and then the TV series and the movies and stuff like that came later. And there's probably dozens to hundreds of these where you had video games that drive the culture. And if you think about the internet in general, the success of video games, think about video games before the internet, right? And there's this thing in video games called open and closed loops. And like the old video games were these closed loops of like, you play Mortal Kombat, you win or you lose, and then it's game over. And okay, I'm going to get some popcorn now. That's the end of the game. Whereas now, like the Candy Crushes and the, various games like that where it just goes forever, right? Partly and mainly due to the infinite scale of the internet, but also the fact that like, Call of Duty, a game like that you're playing against other players, is not possible without the internet. So really, this is an interesting point about Web3 ultimately, and I'll get to that. Video games and the internet kind of grew up together, and popularization of the internet and video games are really one and the same. So if you think about that from a perspective of Web3 is the new internet, and this is the new things of the internet, and you tie in the story of Vitalik, and this is something people often miss, a lot of the concepts from even Ethereum, but crypto and blockchain in general, guess where they come from? Video games. Soulbound tokens is the most obvious one because that's literally like a word from a video game, a soulbound item from a video game. But there's so many more concepts that come from video games that are core to what Ethereum and decentralization and blockchain really is. And as we progress into this Web3 era, of course, guess what's going to come with that? Video games. So that's one of the spaces that I'm very bullish on for that specific reason. It's not just that I love video games. It's just that video games are the internet. If you think of, the meme culture of the internet, it's really tied with video games. It's like, yeah, there's this meme culture of funny things that people put out and jokes and stuff like that. But video games, they connect the world in a way. They connect people, and they're a lot of it is kids that are coming up now, and they're the younger generations. Let's be honest, are mainly the ones playing video games. Yes, there's older generations. I'm a like a late millennial, and I play video games, and there's a lot of people my age that play the Call of Duties and maybe still the World of Warcrafts and things like that. But the younger generations that are out there playing various games too are now getting exposure to this. And as this whole thing grows, if you're betting on Web3, you're also betting on video games. If you're betting on video games, you should be betting on Web3. So you're starting to see that more and more with like video game people that aren't necessarily into Web3. They're starting to realize, wait a minute, this is like the internet. This is like the next evolution of the internet. So yeah, that's the reason why I'm so bullish on video games and Web3. I just think it's pretty obvious, and it will be more obvious to people in hindsight, obviously. But yeah, it encompasses everything Web3. But what I'm excited for the most on that note is to the point that I was giving before about, evil game companies deciding to change everything. They're making all the money. They change the things that the players might not actually want to just affect their profit. More and more when we have the galas of the world that are able to fully decentralize and have players really involved in the key decisions that are happening at the games more and more. And there's a fine line there, of course, but you can't have the players necessarily decide everything. But if they're the players, shouldn't it be player centric and player driven rather than just profit driven of some company deciding something that doesn't actually fit the core of the player? So that's another reason why a fully realized Web3 future includes decentralization or includes a community driven approach where games and other things can have a large push from the community of deciding what actually should change and what should not change. So for all these reasons, really, if you're betting on Web3, you're betting on video games. It is one and the same.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And gaming was partially the reason that I kind of got into Web3. One of my good friends, who is still one of my very, very good friends, we got together and played COD for the longest time. And he was an early adopter of crypto, and I brushed it off and I brushed it off and I brushed it off until finally he was like, yo, I think this is a really good opportunity. I know you've been brushing off crypto, but like, will you just give me like 30 seconds to explain this to you? And I was like, all right. And so he did, and he sent me some videos, and I went down this rabbit hole, and I got into an ICO early, and that kind of sparked my interest in, Web3 and crypto. And it was because of video games. And, I came up with an interesting question that I'm intrigued to hear your answer about when you were talking. And it's, do you think that the biggest Web3 games are going to come from Web2 gaming companies, or do you think they're going to come from specifically purpose-built Web3 companies only with no relation to Web2? Like, they've never put out a Web2 game.
Yeah.
They only focus on Web3. What do you see? Which do you see winning? Yeah.
So I think there's going to be, I hate to be the guy that says both, but there's a reason for it. So the disruptor classically can come in and be really nimble and do stuff that nobody else can do. You're not going to see Call of Duty necessarily leading the way in some of these things, but you're going to see, think of Candy Crush when it came onto the scene. It was just this massive viral sensation that everyone and their mom literally were playing it. And it had these addicting qualities. And they were able to just fully disrupt and just go balls to the wall with what they believed. Now, if you're Blizzard, or Activision, Sony, whatever, you're not going to say, hey, let's just risk everything and just go all in on this Web3 thing and like get rid of all of our profits and like give out just digital property rights. They're not going to necessarily do it from that approach. But what's going to happen is someone's going to come along. They're going to do something massively disruptive. You're going to have 1 billion players, 100 million players, like overnight. You're going to have a chat GPT type video game phenomena that, quote me in 5 years, this will happen, that comes onto the scene. You get 100 million players. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen, this best game ever. And it's got all these digital, it's all these Web3 concepts. It's going to have NFTs. It's going to have all sorts of digital property. It's going to have land. It's going to have all the things, probably tokens as the crypto as the in-game gold and all sorts of other things. It'll be fully on-chain, stuff like that. And maybe even using AI, who knows? But that'll come onto the scene. That'll disrupt everything. And then guess what? Just like the Blockbuster story, right? Yeah, it's gonna say, hey, you can be Blockbuster and you can hold it, try to hold it down, and maybe people will still buy the DVDs. But guess what? Everybody wants this now. Everybody wants streaming. So do you want to be sitting around like Blockbuster hoping people still want the DVDs, saying, hey, we got a big base of DVD sales, but then someone come along with streaming? So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a disruptor, and then you're going to have, who knows which company will be the stupid one that decides to be the Blockbuster and ride it out, but one of them will. And the other ones will pivot and they'll say, look, everyone wants this. We're going to go for it. We want to build fun games. We also want to have NFTs. We can also profit from it XYZ, and so can the players, and there can be a harmonious relationship with the companies and the players. Hopefully in time there's less centralized players, but I think we still have a place for centralized players. I just think it's a more open ecosystem and more decentralization, things like that. So all those games, you'll have Netflix started as a DVD company too, right? So there will be companies that successfully transition over, many of them. I think the games that have a really popular big fan base, as long as they don't make any massive missteps, could do that. Call of Duty could do that. They could also totally mess it up and be like, no, we're not changing no matter what. And, we don't believe in this. And they could be the Blockbuster, right? And become a dinosaur. That's possible too. We'll have dinosaurs too. We will definitely have dinosaurs that become extinct. You'll have games, and this goes for a lot of different industries, by the way. This is an analogy of many industries. But it'll happen in video games for sure. You'll have games that just refuse to change and don't change and become a dinosaur. It's the executives at the game companies are fully aware of this. You have, and even beyond that, you have major companies now, like I think it's CAA has like a head of metaverse. So as these metaverse worlds become linked with games and other things too, all these companies are having these conversations now, like, when do we get into this? How do we get into this? And they're looking at it, right? Just the same thing as, everything is a cycle. It's funny how everything is the same really in the end of the day. It's all these cycles, just different technology, different terms, different things. Same thing happened with the internet. It was like, hey, when do we go digital? It was like, if you go back enough years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, there's the same, when do we make something that's on the computer? When do we make something that's on the internet? When do we make something for Web3? It's all these executives at these companies are having the same conversations. Yeah, it's the smart ones that'll have younger, smarter people that say, yeah, we should get behind this and really be the leader. And you'll have other ones that just try to hold their space as long as they can, help put out the negative press around it and buy themselves a little bit more time. But a lot of those will become dinosaurs. So I think that first you'll see the disruptor to come in to really have some chat GPT like effect where just a bazillion users overnight practically come in and you have some massive sensational game that people jump behind and they say this is the new thing and oh my God, they're doing it the right way. Oh, look at this. And then you'll have companies pivot and say, yep, this is the new model. And you'll have ones that don't. So, but a lot of the games will make it. It's just a matter of how stubborn do they want to be and how stubborn will they be? Yes,
I 100% agree. Very interesting point of view on that. So I was going to ask you another question about where you see the biggest opportunity in the, I guess, NFT and crypto space in the next 12 to 24 months. I think at this point it's pretty obvious where you lay, and that's Web3 gaming. Now, the second part of that question, and if it's not only Web3 gaming, please, correct me, but where do you see the biggest opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years in the Web3 space as well?
Yeah, I think, okay, so video games are of course important to this because I think they're synonymous with Web3 in general, as the points we talked about before. But the things I make my bets on historically, but even now in this space are, so Coinbase is an example. Early on, they were, for the US anyways, the solution. If you wanted crypto, if you wanted an ease of use infrastructure to buy and sell, you went to someone like Coinbase, right? And they obviously did very well. Entrepreneurially as a business, capitalizing on building infrastructure for the masses. And I always look at infrastructure when there's a fast moving new industry. And I think that's where there's going to be a lot of developments. And I think that's where the biggest opportunity is, for people, entrepreneurs, but even existing companies to help lay that baseline infrastructure for what's to come. And it's basically saying, there's something really exciting that a lot of people want, and there's people that want it, but there's a gap. They don't quite know how to do it. So that leaves two things. That leaves infrastructure, and education. So one of the things I'm placing heavy bets on, actually the group you're in as well, Affinity Collective, we're building out a Affinity Accelerator, it's called, which will be for people new to, because one of the things that I saw happening was people would say, well, how do I learn everything about this Web3 stuff? And I was like scratching my head. I was like, I could spend like 12 hours on the phone with you and like try to explain it. But, there really wasn't a great one place to go just to say, hey, how do you learn everything? Like not just crypto, not just NFTs, everything about decentralization and blockchain and, why people do this, how to capitalize. If you're a company, what you can do. If you're an entrepreneur, what you can do, how you can move your company into Web3. And I hear that a lot too, of like, how do you move your company into Web3? And there's a lot of different ideas there. But so anyways, we are working on launching this, education program, Affinity Accelerator, soon for that reason, because I wanted to build a place that I could send people and say, hey, here, just go here to learn everything. And I think that's one of the big opportunities is when there's a fast moving industry, it's and people want it, it's infrastructure and education. And we sometimes underestimate how important education is. And it's not just the how to do it, it's the why you would do it. And there's a lot of misconceptions around blockchain. Let's be honest. I hear this so often. I say this a lot. People say, well, I don't understand how Bitcoin works, so I'm not, or Ethereum, whatever blockchain or token. So I'm not going to invest into it and I'm not going to use it. And I say, really? I say, okay, well, what do you use? What do you use on like a computer? And they'll say, oh, I use Facebook and I use Gmail and Twitter. I say, oh, how does Gmail work? And they say, oh, you go to the site and you write your email and you click send. And I say, that's not how it works. That's what it does. So you're comparing crypto and trying to figure out what it does. If you're not a developer, you don't know how Gmail works. I don't even know I know what they do. HTTPS, TCP/IP, FTP. I know what they do. I can't really tell you how they work on a technical level. Same with just about everything else that I use on the computer. Like I have a baseline, technical knowledge, but I'm not a developer. I don't know the intricate technical details of how the circuits fire and, how it connects through the wires and through the air and the Wi-Fi and why it works. I can't really tell you that. So this one of the easy, it's really just more of a debate tactic, but it's kind of misdirection in a way that naysayers of crypto say. Well, they say, well, no one knows how it works. Does anyone, unless you're a developer, do you know how any of the other stuff you use works? So it's kind of a dumb argument. And often people will eventually realize, oh, wait a second. Like, yeah, you can go be a blockchain developer if you want to and learn smart contract languages and all that kind of stuff. But the bigger opportunity is what it does. It's not necessarily about the technical details of how a blockchain works. And I encourage people to learn that, by the way. I think it's very interesting to look at Etherscan or to look at a Bitcoin blockchain explorer or for any of the chains. They have these explorers that you can actually look and see sort of It doesn't show you like the code per se, actually. Well, it does in a way, but you can have a bit of a more understanding of how these digital ledgers, which is really all they are. Ethereum is essentially a digital ledger with extra code attached to it. Bitcoin is a digital ledger. You can send, tokens around and do a few other things. So yeah, it's really more about what it can do. But yeah, I encourage people to, if they want to learn some of the technicals, they can, but it's more about what can you do with this? That's the opportunity of and we're only this far in. We're that far in, it's really, when you think of Ethereum, we're just getting to that 10-year mark basically. But it's way less than that in terms of actual development. Cause we're just starting to see, even Ethereum is not done with their roadmap. They're just barely starting, with their roadmap. So there's a lot of things that come, a lot of upgrades and things like that will be happening with Ethereum to make it faster and better. It's already pretty fast, but there's other chains that do extra transaction speeds and additional functions, and they have specific blockchains that you can get into that are specializing in things like gaming or other infrastructure, and there's opportunity there as well.
I have nothing to comment aside from I agree completely. It's very interesting that you're doing an education thing with Affinity. I definitely want to hear more. Our entire plan for this year is to put out a lot of educational focused content around teaching how to get into Web3 safely and understand, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how things work a little bit, not the nitty gritty details, right? You don't need to understand the specifics of the back end of Gmail, just like you don't need to know how a node works to use it. You just click a button. And, I think that we saw that when we came into the space with Just Cubes. What we did was we didn't necessarily introduce anything new to the space. We took something that people didn't really know about and taught them, hey, this is how you can increase your transaction speed on the Ethereum blockchain without having to spend a bunch of money to spin up your own node. You don't have to learn about all these specifics. Just come in our Discord, purchase the NFT, verify, and put this information in your MetaMask and go on your merry way. If you have problems, if you have questions, come ask us. And that's it. It's very simplistic. And I think you said it best. The people who educate alongside with infrastructure will be the winners and onboard a lot of people. And so, education is huge, and that's a big focus for us in 2023 and beyond. So I'm interested to hear more about what Affinity is going to do with that.
Yeah. On the education side too, just one note, and I think this is a kind of a call to action for people. I've noticed it works for me. I think it works for others too. When you teach people something, you have to challenge your own thinking because you learn the baseline information better when you're teaching. At least most people do. So if I'm teaching you, not necessarily like the technical details of how something works, but just the basics, even of like how to use a wallet or, how to move an NFT around, something like that. When you get into the little specific details, you might actually find yourself learning something just by going through that and reinforcing the information in your own mind. So sometimes, and it challenges you to think about it from a different perspective. It's kind of like the true master. It's kind of like the true master is a student for life. So, a lot of people in this space are like, oh, I'm like this expert in this thing. And it's like, are any of us really experts? Hasn't been around that long. So if we're all kind of students of life and constantly learning and teaching, we're going to naturally get better than the person that says, yep, I know everything, I'm good. It's like, well, no, you got to keep that axe sharp. Absolutely.
I 100% agree with that. I have mentors whom I learn from, and oftentimes, a week after our weekly meeting, I'll hop on with them for our weekly meeting the next week and ask them, hey, how's your week going? What's going on? And more often than not, when I get a response about that question, it's like, yo, last week when I told you about this, like specifically taught you about something that you asked me, I went into work the next day, or I ran into this problem the following days this past week, and I was able to go, oh wait, I just told Adam to do this. why don't I just do this with this problem, right? And so you learn a lot more from teaching. And I'm very excited to be really pushing a ton of education because I love learning. Like, I don't know if you've noticed how many books are in the background. Like,
I've got a lot too in the other room.
I am just a reading aficionado. And so I recently just started mentoring somebody else, and I'm learning a ton just from basic conversation. And
for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think that is going to be a massive opportunity in the space to be able to teach people, because if you can teach and educate somebody who's coming into Web3 in a knowledgeable way and not try and be like greedy about it, right? There's some education platforms that look like they're just trying to cash grab as much money as they can right now, and it's a really a big turnoff to me. But if you can actually genuinely teach somebody how to get into Web3 safely, how to operate, how to understand what's going on without asking for anything in return, you're going to get more in return than you gave them, in trust, in word of mouth, in knowledge gained back from when you taught. And I think it's a massive opportunity. I'm very excited to dive into more education and shoot educational content this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, we could collaborate, but, I think that's an important point for the space is like, think about it collaboratively. And also, for mentors too, don't forget, sometimes people think of it as, let me find someone junior that I can mentor. No, it's not necessarily the case. I mentor people that, I may or may not be qualified to mentor for, and may or may not be qualified to mentor me, and vice versa, and all which way around. And that's kind of the point, is you may learn things from people that you don't expect to, by both teaching and receiving information. So I have mentors that people will look at and go, why is that person your mentor? Like, why are they a mentor of yours? That doesn't make any sense. But it's because you'll think of something from a different perspective and learn something you may not have learned because they have a specific set of knowledge. It doesn't matter if they're more or less successful. It's just really about sort of specific knowledge and things you can pick up on and learn differently and think about things outside the box, that you might not have otherwise thought of. And I think, the other point on that too is that one problem that we face a lot in this space, in every space really, but you see it a lot in Web3 and crypto. You see people, conferences, great example. It's like you go to the conference, you're on stage, you're talking about conferences, you're talking about Web3 or NFTs or crypto with people that agree with you about Web3 or crypto or NFTs. Yes, we get it. We're the people that are there. That's the thing. But we need podcasts like this. They're going to go out to other people that are going to say they're going to be more friendly to a larger audience, to a wider base of audience that aren't getting into like technical details of how to code a smart contract with, a select group of 4,000 people in the world that can understand that. We want topics that can open up the doors and say, hey, all those people out there that don't have any clue what about this is, here's why you need to get in. Watch this. Here's what it's really about. We need more of that. So yeah, shows like yours that are doing that. In bringing this to the masses and not just creating like a little niche bubble that everyone already agrees with each other and having nice polite conversations that everyone agrees. It's like we're talking to everybody else about why they should be coming into here and why they should be looking at that. So that's everything everything I think about and I'm doing in the space is really about the masses. How do we get the masses in? Let's talk to them. All of us are already in agreement. This is the stuff we want to focus on. This is why. But it's about making it friendly to all them, in doing that. So everything I do, I'm trying to think about, someone that stumbles upon this for the first time that says, okay, well, what is this stuff? Why should I be focusing on it? Oh, they hear something new. Okay, yes, video games make sense now because they're so harmonious and synonymous with the internet itself. It's going to naturally progress and grow over time into Web3. That makes a lot of sense because it's already been a core function of the internet. So it would make sense that they've used concept like digital property, digital characters from video games and now made them transferable and ownable on a blockchain. Okay, I can get my head behind that. Oh, the digital gold from the video games. That can be a token now that you can sell and buy and transfer instead of being stuck in the auction houses of World of Warcraft or stuck in the centralized grasps. You can now transfer to your friends and you can save your character progress and sell and buy those characters. Not that it's only about money. It's about the transferability, the utility that can come with those digital assets and many other things. So I'm always thinking about how to make things friendly to a mainstream audience that might be video gamers, for instance, but they don't know a whole lot about Web3 and maybe have a lot of misconceptions too. Maybe they have a misconception of like, oh, that play to earn stuff that, is just scammy or something because they saw one game that just had a outrageous model that may have showed us what was possible, that showed that money could be made doing this, but maybe it wasn't sustainable. But that was just one of many experiments and tests to show what can be done. And now we have different models coming into play that are some are working fairly well and that don't have, economy, financial driven incentives, that it's more about players or more about the users, which is what it should be, right? But also having benefits on a financial side. So I'm always thinking about that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I agree. And this is a perfect transition into a question that I often like to ask every single one of my guests when I come on the podcast, because we are trying to educate people, and my target audience for the most part for this podcast is not the Web3 user who understands how to mint from a smart contract and maybe use a minting bot and snipe tokens and use decentralized exchanges very easily. It's somebody who's intrigued and doesn't know much about Web3, but wants to, and they want to be educated. And so the question is, how do you define what an NFT is to somebody who does not understand the technology at all?
Yeah. So, I think there's the classic example that I like to give of, as a kid, I can't see him, but I have a whole case of collectibles behind me. And I was into all sorts of collectibles and, baseball cards. I even collected video game cartridges. I had various figurines, all sorts of things. I had the old Pogs. I had, all sorts of sports cards and things like that. And eventually the Pokemon cards and the various card game cards and things. Magic the Gathering, I remember having a lot of those. And those were physical collectibles. And the very first, there's many. NFTs is a very broad term. It's an unfungible token, of course, but in a very simple sense, they're just taking collectibles, and this is a current use case. There's other use cases with video games and stuff, but as a simple analogy, these collectibles, the Pokemon cards, the baseball cards, the figurines, the collectibles, these are digital versions of those. So pieces of art are those NFTs. What's also interesting and why NFTs are so big and successful that people often miss is that digital artists, for the first time ever in human history, because think of it before, right? You had paintings. You have your painting. You make a painting. That's your painting. You've made a one of one painting, or maybe you drew 50. You could make copies of those, but if you wanted the originals, there was only so many you could possibly draw, or paint, or whatever your medium was. With digital artists, there was a problem. The problem was I could draw a picture on Photoshop or whatever my digital painting program was, or on my iPad, or even offline and scan it, whatever. But digital art, for the most part, they had a problem. You could post your image online, and there was no distinguishable way to tell what the difference is between this one saving copy of this and saving another copy of this. And you often see a classic misconception of people that don't understand what NFTs are. They say, oh, you posted your Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT on Twitter. Save as, haha, I got it now. And they think it's so funny, and they think it's the classic joke for people new to blockchain and crypto. But the joke is actually on them. The whole point is that NFT is traceable and trackable and saved on a blockchain in the ledger that says this is the one of one Picasso, just the same as that artist had, that was his one of one or one of 50. Now it's trackable and provable, just like an auction house. Christie's can say, yep, that's a real Picasso. It's worth money. It's worth, $14 million because it's the real Picasso. I can make a copy of that and take a picture of it on my phone or scan it or something and make a close similar copy that looks the same, but it's not going to be worth $14 million because it's not the original. It's not the actual validated real one. That's what people want. That's what makes it valuable. Scarcity, right? Because it's a real one of 50 or one of one. Same with a digital asset, same with an NFT. That's why digital artists now, for the first time ever, can do that same thing and have one of one pieces that are trackable and provable on a blockchain and not able to be, replicated in a sense that that's where it's going to keep the value. And this is possible now for the first time. That's why you see guys like Beeple selling art for millions and millions of dollars, and many, many others. There's been record sales for hundreds of millions even on different single pieces of art or collections of art. And that's the same reason why these, they call them the 10,000 NFT project PFPs, profile pic collections, can be worth money, because you have one of the 10,000 Bored Apes. There's only 10,000 in the world, provable on a blockchain that nobody can hack, modify, or edit in any possible way. And that's the validated one that stores and maintains and keeps the value. So that's why NFTs are valuable. It's this technology that's been possible for the first time for digital artists and many others to store that value in a way that's provable, just like an auction house, in many ways more fair than an auction house. Who really knows what these appraisers are saying and behind the scenes deals? And that's the real one. You see in the movies all the time that there's a classic scam of like some fake appraiser comes in and says, that's a Picasso. Yeah, give me $7 million. $7 million to my buddy. And it turns out to be a copy. With a blockchain, that can't happen because it's provable, trackable, and nobody can modify it, and it's on there forever, and you can provably show which one is the real one that has the value.
Boom. There it is. Absolutely. It's like going to a museum and seeing that Picasso, whipping out your phone, taking a picture and saying, "Oh, I own the Picasso now." No, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah.
The
exactly.
auction house does, or whoever, right. But it's on the blockchain. It's provable. It's public also, which it instills trust as well, and kind of self-regulates, which is very important, I think, especially when we want to move away from centralization and governments having their hands in things like that. And like you said, the guy at the auction house could be, saying, "Oh yeah, it's worth this." That stops that, right? And oftentimes the market decides what it's worth. Beeple's 5,000 edition was the market deciding what it was worth, and it's worth $69 million or whatever. Well, I know that we are wrapping up on time right now, so why don't you finalize this episode by telling the users, one, how they can get in touch with you, two, the number one thing you want them to know about what you're doing in the Web3 space, that's the closest and most important to your heart at this point in time.
Yeah, you can just follow me, Brian D. Evans, pretty much everywhere, Twitter, just my name with the middle initial there. By the way, the story with the middle initial is that there's a famous singer that goes by Brian Evans, and when I was starting my sort of journey with personal branding, he was pretty famous, and even like kind of looks like he looks like an older version of me a little bit. So I started using the D just to like distinguish myself. It's actually a very common name. There's like tens of thousands of Brian Evans. So that's why I started using the middle initial. It just kind of stuck with me. It's not like a pretentious thing about, "Oh, hey, please use my middle initial." It's just, it was to distinguish myself. So I always tell people that story just because sometimes people ask. But that's why I use it. Affinity is the most affinity.xyz. It's for more intermediate and advanced people, but so you can go on there and look into it if you're in that category. Or education is so important to me, not just Web3 and education overall, but just education in general. I got behind one of Animoca's Tiny Tap education projects a while back. I think we spent like $30K on some education NFT that promotes digital rights for teachers, and it flips the model. So check them out, Tiny Tap. I just think that some of the way that education plays out in the United States anyways is in the schools there's some better ones now, but it wasn't so great when I was there. So I'm excited to see more, because if you think about it, if teachers can get paid better, then obviously the content eventually is going to get better and better, because they're not going to be forced to do it from governments and some program that doesn't work for half the people. So excited about that. And building out our Affinity Accelerator. So you can also find that on affinity.xyz probably the next couple of weeks by the time this episode comes out. That should be launched, and we're doing an education program for people that just want a one-stop shop to teach anybody about Web3. And so pretty excited about those things. I'm also on a mainstream crypto TV show coming up. It'll be out in June. It's called The Next Crypto Gem. And a number of other things coming up. I'm doing a keynote speech at Token 2049 in Singapore in September. So you'll probably see me in some of those things.
All right. So the next and final question that I like asking our guests, this is totally open. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I don't often get time on these shows to connect with the guests and find out really who they are and things related to them that aren't related to Web3 and tech and what we're doing and talking about. So what I like to ask is, tell me about yourself, like one thing about yourself that is interesting, could be a hobby, could be something that you love doing, a favorite movie, anything really. It's just something simple and a way to connect a little bit closer to you.
Yeah, well, one thing that's changed a lot for me in the last 2 years, I'm a new parent for the first time. I have a 16-month-old daughter, and really just enjoying that. And just, in many ways, while I enjoy it so much, it also challenges me to think about things differently and see the world differently of like, hey, it's not just about me anymore. It's about like all these next generations and my daughter's generation now. And, really wanting to improve things and way beyond Web3, of course, and seeing the world differently. So, that's been a new exciting thing for me. Challenges, of course, but also massively worth it. And, something that has made me think differently. It's been one of the best things in the last 10 years, really, to make me think about things differently, than I was. So, it's definitely been an eye opener. So that's, one of the new things for me.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that. I know, I actually just had a conversation about having children's and the things that you learn from that with somebody that I look highly of. And it was an interesting conversation. So you're on a very interesting path with raising a child. I am not there yet, but I look forward to it in the future. All I hear is that it's one of the most rewarding experiences of life, and I want to experience that. With that being said,
for sure.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Brian's information will be linked below in the podcast show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, the YouTube description. Brian, thank you for coming on today. I had a great time interviewing you and talking about Web3. I'm excited to see what you guys are doing. I am excited to see what we can work out with Affinity and the education stuff you have going there. So with that being said, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Peace.
Thanks so much.